Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. Today we're starting the series where we go over the lore of the Crota's End raid. Whilst the story of Crota ends with us breaking him beneath his own sword, the tale of the Son of Oryx really begins in the Books of Sorrow. If we're to start to talk about the downfall of our first Hive God, we have to start at the moment where he became separated from his father and was sent out into the universe. This moment, in my opinion, marked Crota as a crusader of the Hive and as a force that would tithe to Oryx from afar. Had it not been for that distance, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to end him so quickly. But regardless of his end, Crota's story, as it pertains to us, started in a throne world, but a different one from the one he died in, and it is there that he failed to prove himself worthy. But first, stop me if you've heard this one before, but hey, want a great gaming PC? Check out Apex. I got my own custom line with them and they perform beautifully. Use my code at checkout for a discount. You're welcome.
Okay, but seriously, you should check out Apex. I don't have any Zerv videos though.
Anyway, back to the lore. So, here's the question that really prompts us as the narrative begins. Why was Crota out there on the moon, unlike Uranuk and Urhalak, his two sisters, who were with Oryx on the Dreadnought? Why wasn't Oryx keeping all the members of his family safe? Why was he willing to just send them out into the universe as extensions of himself if he knew that their death would be such a significant destruction of tithing that he would have to respond? All of that stems, I think, from Crota's earlier failures in his life. This is very much conjecture, but I think it's worth understanding this moment because it puts Crota into the context of the other Hive Gods too. So even if it is the case that Oryx had only temporarily banished Crota and that he was back in his father's good graces, it does give us a little bit of an idea of where he was relative to other Hive Gods, where he was according to Oryx's own opinion of him, perhaps, and it also gives us a vague idea of what the Hive is like, and that them being spread out over these vast distances is not completely unheard of. All of this is recounted within the Books of Sorrow, and I know this is something I've said a bunch as we go over that 8th Book of Sorrow series, but you can't necessarily trust the 8th Book of Sorrow in the same way you can't necessarily trust the first 5 Books of Sorrow. It's just not written by a reliable narrator, and we know that now thanks to everything that went down in Witch Queen and the additional information gained from there. I've already gone over that point a whole bunch, but take everything you read within these books with a pinch of salt. All that being said, it is our only recollection of what happened, and thus far it's been the only one that's provided at least a certain degree of recounting of that part of history, and so we are going to refer to it, but with that caveat that the knowledge might not necessarily be all there or all correct. The incident recounted is also thanks to the machinations of Savathun and thanks to Crota's two sisters and their ambitions, so if you needed even less reason to trust everything going on in the Books of Sorrow, perhaps with this incident in particular, look no further. Either way, we're going over 3 entries, the first of which, Partition of Death, reads as follows. One day, Oryx decided to grow new wings. While he wrestled with his worm, he came upon his twin daughters, dying in a wound between places. "What are you doing, my daughters?" he asked. He was afraid that Urhalak and Uranuk were trying to go into the deep, where only the tablets of ruin allowed Oryx to go. "We are dying, father," they said, "as many times as we can manage." "That's adorably precocious." Oryx shook out his new wings. "But why?" "We propose a method by which ascendant souls can be detached and integrated into a tautological and autonomous thanatosphere, which we tentatively term an oversoul. Oversouls can be stored in a throne world as a mechanism of enhanced death resilience. As a side effect, new refinements to our death song may be achieved, moving us closer to a generally effective paracausal death impulse." Oryx brandished his sword. "Speak the royal tongue, or I'll pin you up for Aya to eat." "If we can separate our deaths from ourselves and hide them, we will be harder to kill." Oryx went to his son Crota. "Go keep an eye on your sisters," he said. "You can learn cunning from them." But while Oryx traveled to observe the deep destroy an ancient fortress world, Crota conspired with his sisters to learn their secrets. "I too will experiment with a wound," he said. With his sword, Crota cut open a new wound, into a new space. In here he thought he might obtain a secret power. Out of this wound came machines called Vex. They invaded Oryx's throne world. Before we talk about the Vex invasion, it's worth remembering that the Oversoul that the two sisters of Crota create in this lore is actually the same defense that we find in the final encounter of the Crota's End raid, above Crota's own throne. It's something that his throne world is seemingly named after, given that it's called the Oversoul Throne. The Oversoul is reactive to death in the original version of Crota's End from D1 before it was patched in Age of Triumph. At that point, it would activate whenever a player died, seizing that moment of death probably for more power, and the death impulse would then need to be responded to with overwhelming force if anyone was to survive it. Effectively, if you didn't have enough firepower in that moment, the Oversoul was a wipe. The mechanic was eventually changed, but the original principle within the lore remains active. Oversouls are thanatospheres, spheres of death, that increase the resilience of those that created them, and the extra impressive defenses are something that is tied into the Hive's keen understanding of death. And should the throne world require it, that death impulse can end invaders quickly. Returning to the problem of the Vex, Crota and his siblings weren't exactly having a great time of things as the invasion proceeded. Things were quickly getting out of hand. The Vex clattered around, constructing large problems. At first, their constructions were deranged because they didn't understand the sword logic, which defined all rules in Oryx's throne world. The geometry perplexed them. "I'll cut them apart," Crota said. But just then, the Vex ritual of better thought manifested a mind called Qoria, Blade Transform. Qoria deduced the sword logic. "I have to kill everything," Qoria resolved. "Then I will be powerful." Crota's gate began to emit warrior Vex, huge and brassy. He leapt forward to fight them, but they blinked away. After they fled from Crota, they killed 2,000 of Oryx's acolytes and 10,000 of his thrall. Soon they had established themselves as powers in this world by right of slaughter. "Come forth, sister wizards," called Halak. "We need you." Uranuk pulled a sword star out of the sky. Together the wizards charged it with killing power and made an annihilator totem, which they used to smash the Vex. "Close the wound, brother Crota," Anuk ordered. "We will find a cunning way to destroy them, but only after they stop constructing problems on us." But Qoria had instanced itself to the other side of the gate and built a holdfast to keep the way open. Qoria's objective was to exploit the paracausal physics of Oryx's throne to become divine. It organized a series of test invasions. For 100 years of local time, the siblings fought the Vex. When the Vex came into the Sword world, they were inevitably annihilated. But when the Hive went into the Vex world, they lost too much of their power to win. "Father's going to eat our souls," Halak sighed. Qoria captured some worm larvae and began experimenting with them. Soon, Qoria Blade Transform manifested religious tactics. By directing worship at the worms, Quria learned it could alter reality with mind-ontopathogenic effects. Being an efficient machine, Quria manufactured a priesthood and ordered all its subminds to believe in worship. Then, it set about abducting and killing dangerous organisms so it could bootstrap itself to hive godhood. For some Vex reason, Quria never attempted to introduce worm larvae into its mind fluid. Savathun was laughing, because she had tricked Crota into cutting that place. This drew the attention of the Worm-Ar god. "Oryx," called Aya, "set your house in order." Oryx rushed home and read from the Tablets of Ruin. He put some Vex into wounds to be taken by the power of the deep. Thus he turned the Vex against each other. Quria manifested a range of tactics, but none of them were adaptive. Oryx crushed all the Vex in his throne. Oryx thought that he should study geometry, like the Vex. It was the map of perfect shapes. But first, he had to punish imperfection. "My son," he said, "this is your punishment. Come home glorious, or die forgotten." He picked up Crota by the legs and threw him into the Vex gate network. Crota battled through history, becoming a legendary demon. In his early centuries, he often spared a few victims to hear oaths and protests against his father. Later, he came to understand Oryx, and he made temples and monuments wherever he went. Meanwhile, Oryx brooded on the Vex. "I've met a worthy rival," he said. "They want to exist forever, just as I do. But I don't understand them." At this, his worm began to chew on him, for he was bound to understand. He called Savathun to meet in the material world. She told him that the Vex worked tirelessly to understand everything, so that they could build a victory condition for every possible end state of the universe. "Then I must be a better king," Oryx said. "They want to build an emperor for all outcomes. Then I will be the king of only one. I will follow the deep wherever it goes and document its power. Let us create a catalogue of the grave of worlds, which will be our map to victory." Oryx knew that all life could be described as cellular automata, except for that life which understood the deep or the sky and thus escaped causality. Out of love for her brother, which was the same as the desire to kill him, Savathun leaked a secret to Xivu Arath. "Listen, Xivu. Oryx's throne world has been compromised. You can cut your way in from here." Xivu Arath used this to plan an ambush. But Oryx was too canny. The Taken King said to his court, the High War, "My throne world is vulnerable. I am going to move it." "Where?" said Kargor, Worldrender. "Into a mighty dreadnought," said Oryx. "I shall keep my glorious mind, Cosmos, inside a titanic warship." So yes, for those of you wondering, and those of you who might have played The Taken King, this is where Oryx's original idea for the creation of the Dreadnought came from. But more importantly, it is the moment that saw Crota banished from Oryx's domain. Now, again, let me make that clarification, which is this: it isn't clear if Crota is still, at the point at which we find him in the Crota's End raid, exiled. If he is, it explains a great deal about the distance between himself and Oryx. And I don't know if there's any easy way to confirm it, but there are some things that we can infer. Whilst there is no easy confirmation in the lore, and you should take these next few sentences with a pinch of salt, keep in mind that Crota remained in the Sol system whilst Oryx did not. This alone might be a means to account for the standing between the Taken King and his son. But the presence of the shrine of Oryx within the Hellmouth begins to tell me something more. It's worth remembering, as was stated in the lore, that Crota raised monuments and temples and maybe shrines to his father as he proceeded to engage in his crusades against the Light and the Traveler. The shrine within the Hellmouth was also guarded by some of the Hive's strongest champions in the days of early Destiny 1, including Sardok, the Eye of Oryx. No matter what the case may be, at the time of our assault on the Oversoul throne, Oryx was not there, and was not able to respond with reinforcements, and so our assault proceeded unimpeded. It's worth also understanding one of the core mechanics of sword logic here, which maybe does give us just that little bit more context. If Oryx was going to involve himself in our battle against his son, he would be somewhat of a hypocrite. To go ahead and try and drive this point home, take a listen to what happens with regards to Xivu Arath and the death of Oryx himself. This is a little recording that's from this week's worth of story. It's the same one that Imaru plays back to us. It's Xivu Arath's reaction to the actual death of Oryx, and it's a moment which Savathûn calls hypocritical by their own logic. Take a listen.
Our brother is dead. I will take my revenge as he sought for his son.
Revenge? For what? The dead deserved to die. That's your own logic. Oryx was a hypocrite, and so are you.
He loved us. He made of our deaths a study. And she, who has endured, who sharpened the sword of his defeat, has done the same. She will take up this mantle. When she is paired to her true shape, we will meet her on the bladed path.
What a vain child you are. Oryx spoiled you rotten. Not everyone wants to be like you. And you won't always get your way.
I will test my strength against her brood, and she will prove our logic true.
I find this to be a really fascinating addition to the lore, partly because of the fact that it shows that there is indeed a reason for the Hive not to intervene in the battles that they see their kin conducting with the enemy, but also it provides us with Savathûn's further opinions potentially on Oryx and his decision to invade the system during the Taken King. Now, let's be really clear. From the perspective of Toland the Shattered, he states that Oryx's invasion is not defying sword logic and is not disrespecting the strength we display by killing Crota. Instead, he says that it was necessary for Oryx to respond, because if he didn't respond, it would not be enough to prove his own strength, and he must continuously be the next strongest thing in the universe. Thus is the nature of sword logic. We were there and Crota was not, therefore Oryx needed to challenge that notion, so that he knew that he was still the strongest within the eyes of the sword logic, and that he would still have been, at least what he might have believed at the time, worthy of the final shape. But again, this is all getting into that further point of why Oryx was not at Crota's side when this battle ensued. There are many reasons consistently within the lore why this might not have been, and whether it was to do with the way that the Hive conduct sword logic, or whether it was simply due to Crota's banishment, if that was still in effect, the reality was this: we went ahead, entered the Oversoul throne, and were able to destroy the son of Oryx. But this is just the first event that I think led to this moment, and it answers the first big question of why wasn't Oryx there to help his son? Between that moment of Crota's exile and the moment of his death, a cascade of collapsing events would take place that would first seemingly cement Crota's power and would then dramatically weaken it. The most important of these moments is what we're going to cover next, as we take a more in-depth look at the circumstances that led to the Great Disaster, when an army of more than 1,000 Guardians marched on Luna and were broken beneath the darkest edge But for now, that's all from me in this video. If you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, and remember that you can leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Of course, you can also hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia Arastra. I'll see you, Starside.